So today I want to take a look at making this nav that you see at the top of this page. You see when I scroll down just a couple of pixels, it turns white and it shrinks, and then it's going to go away when I get down here, and then I scroll back up and it comes back and pops back open. This is pretty cool. You see this all over the place, and it's not a hard effect to achieve, but it looks really neat, and adds a little bit of polish to your site instead of having a regular old sticky nav at the top, or just a nav that scrolls out of the viewport like many of them do. So we're going to look at how to make this, and we're going to start from scratch, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. So I've got nothing here except for some an assets folder with this picture that I pulled offline. Inspecting the DOM on this thing, on this theme, which is what this is. It's a sample for a theme called Uncode. I mean, it's just I don't want to call it a mess, but it's just all over the place. There's nested divs, and for the life of me, I could not find the URL, the source for this image. So instead of spending too much time on that, I just went and found another one that we're going to use for this project. And you can use any picture. It doesn't really matter. It just looks kind of cool. So we've got assets, and now, okay, so you're going to just see me fumble through this. I'm not going to make it in the assets folder. So you're just going to kind of see me fumble through this as I make mistakes and have to look things up, but that's okay. We're going to get it done and hopefully have a cool project to look at. All right, so starting with our index, and I'm going to open this, and we'll see that it's completely blank. Nice. Okay, so starting from nothing. Here we go. So let's do our HTML boilerplate, just typing HTML and getting HTML5. This is called obviously nav. So what do we want to do first? I'm going to make my HTML, write the HTML first. So all I want for this kind of demo is, or just to kind of show the proof of concept for doing the nav, is I want a main and I want a nav, right? And in my nav, I'm just going to have some options, times 5, and let's borrow from this guy here. Home, pages, features, works. Let's do home, pages, features. I'm going to call that work. That sounds more natural to me. And what's another one? Extra. Okay. So we're going to jump back over here and see we've got a little unordered list. So let's start writing some styles then. Let's go ahead and style up our nav just a little bit. So I'm going to say from my Nav Element, I'm going to target, oops, that was, again, I said you're going to see me do dumb things. Instead of a style tag would help. We're going to do a Nav Element, and I'm going to say Nav UL, and we're going to say list style none, so that it doesn't give the bullets on each list item. And then we're going to hop down to the UL LI so we get the actual list items, and I'm going to say display inline block so that they all line up next to each other. Let's take a quick peek. Nice. Let's do some inspecting. So I opened up my dev tools here, and I'm going to inspect these guys and see what some nice padding looks like. So I'm going to do it here so that I can see it live. Top, bottom of 0, right, left of 10. Oops, don't want to do top, bottom. I want to do right, left. That looks pretty good. And we'll do a font size of, this is probably going to be too big. Oh, that looks okay. That's my cat. We'll do font size 20. What do they have? I'm going to inspect this and see. Their font size, if I look at my computed styles, which is what actually gets carried out, font size, they only do 12, really? Looks bigger than 12. Okay. I like 20 better. I'm just going to go with 20. Okay, going to copy our styles from here, hop back over to our list item here. And we're going to do that. Okay, so now we're going to say for our nav itself, not slash, but dot, we're going to say text align. Center. So what do I want out of my nav? We're just thinking of getting this, oops, not style. So now it's centered. Okay, so what else do I want to do? I want to do this little underline like they've got here. Probably want to set the height on my nav. I'm not going to do the right and left because the point of this demo is to look at the expanding and collapsing navs. So I'm going to first, you know what, I got to do my background image so that I'll be able to see this faint underline because it's kind of white and I'm on a white background now. So let me do this. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say this will be my main section. And you know what they have here, if I look at what they've done here, it's kind of clever, is that the hero image stops and then it turns to a regular background, just a solid color behind it. And that solid color kind of blends smoothly into the color of the image. You don't really notice a hard line where the image stops and the background color begins. I'm not sure exactly how they did this, but one way to do it would be to lay a gradient on top of this image that fades into the same color as the rest of your background. So that's what I'm going to be doing, even if that's not what they did here, but it's still going to look pretty nice, I think. So in order to do a gradient overlay on top of my background, I'm going to have two nested divs as part of my hero. So first I'm going to have my hero wrapper, and then I'm going to have my hero. So with these two things, I'm going to put the background image on one of them, and I'm going to put the gradient on the other. So here we've got, I'm going to define the class for my hero wrapper first. And I want it to have a, let's see, I want it to have a height, a fixed height, so that as if the image scales, for instance, I'm just walking you guys through everything that I'm thinking, but as the image scales, you see it's kind of going to maintain a consistent height. That background image is shrinking and growing, but it's not spilling over down into the bottom area. It's not growing past a certain point. So I'm going to go ahead and set a height on this thing and call it, let's see, it should be 850 pixels, something like that. It should be pretty tall. What else? So now I think for my wrapper, that's going to be it for other than my image, right? So I need now to set my image for my wrapper. So I'm going to say background, and then I'm going to have a URL to give the source for my image, and I'm going to grab this, copy the relative path, and I'm going to test this because I always do something dumb when it comes to this kind of thing. All right, there we go. So I've got my image, but it's not at all the way that I want it to be. So first things first, let's finish this out. I did not notice it repeating, but of course it's good to be explicit and say background repeat, no repeat, center. I want to center it. Okay, so let's see if that makes a difference. Okay, so now we've got our background centered. It's not repeating, but you can see a few things. We've got some padding around the edges that I don't want, and the nav is sitting as a block on top of it. So let's go fix those things now. So the padding on the side I can do with a kind of clean that up with just kind of a light reset, CSS reset, where I'm going to override at least the default margin and padding that's applied by the browser. by the user agent style sheet or by the, whatever it's called, the style sheet that is applied by your browser. So I'm going to overcome that by manually setting my margin for every element to start with to 0 and my padding to 0. Okay, so that takes care of that. So now there's no default margin or padding for any elements provided by my browser. And then I'm going to go in to my nav, and I'm going to say display, I'm sorry, not display, position, fixed, top 0, left 0, width 100% of the viewport width, VW, and then we're going to say height, I don't know, what should this be, like 70, 75 pixels. And then we're going to do a border bottom like we talked about. Solid 1 pixel. And I'm going to start with white just to see how that looks. I hope I did everything right. Let's take a look. Okay, cool. So what do I want to do next? I want to fix up my nav, then I'll get into the colors bleeding into the bottom, just because I'd like this to look nice for starters. So first thing, easy thing to take care of is this border bottom that's going to define our nav. You see, I set this at 1 pixel, which is the smallest size that you can make it, and yet it still looks really thick compared to theirs. This looks really thin. It's even thinner than a pixel. Well, how do you do that? Well, again, I'm not quite sure. Their CSS is really hard to make any sense of because there's so much going on. But what I can do is grab this and change the opacity and bump that way down to, like, I don't know, this. See, now it looks really light, and now I've just added alpha to my RGB. So I have, or not RGB, to my hex. I mean, this is a hex color code, and it's just added an opacity at the end. This 3 and the 6 are gonna be what sets its opacity. So if I jump back over and then now use this value with the adjusted opacity, now that'll work. Okay, next thing is I want to center this stuff. So I want to, because this is going to be growing and shrinking, I don't want to center these with padding. I'm going to use Flexbox, and I'm going to do a align items center. I think that's the one that'll do it. So let's set nav to display as flex so that I can make use of the, is it align items center? Let's see. Okay, so that works, but this is now overridden. So that has vertically aligned my text to doing align items, but it has now overridden my text align. And so I'm going to have to do justify content center if I want them to actually be centered. Did I save that? Yes, I did. Cool. Okay, so now it's centered. And now what you'll see is I can just manually adjust the height. Even if I scale this, which I'm going to be doing in JavaScript later, my text is going to stay centered. So I can, for instance, when the user scrolls down, I can bump this down and the text is going to stay centered and look really nice. Next, I want to change the color, the default color of my font here. So now it's going to be white. And then I hate this font, and I really like the one they used here, which if I inspect it, and scroll down in my computed styles to font family. Oops, missed it. Font family is called Poppins. This is a free Google font. Poppins font. And you can see I've already been there. So I can go to Google Fonts and just grab this Poppins. And I think I'm going to just stick with the, what do they give me? 400 regular. I'm just going to stick with one weight because I'm just going to be doing the nav in this demo. So I'm going to hop back over here. I'm going to add my font family here, and I'm going to set, I'll set it globally. Well, let's set it on the nav. Let's be tidy about this. Font family. Poppins, and then just for good order's sake, I'll go to fallback of sans serif so that if for whatever reason Poppins doesn't load, you have a fallback. Again, this is just a demo. This is not necessary, but it's a really good practice to always have a fallback. So there is our Poppins font. Okay, nav looks good. So now I'm going to take care of our gradient on our image, our background color, and our ability to scroll. That's the next thing that we need in order to do any of this. So I've done my hero wrapper. Now I talked about doing that for the sake of having the gradient. So now on my hero, I'm going to give it a height as well of, what's my hero height is 850. I'm going to use 850. Make sure it's full width, 100% of the viewport width, and then I'm going to give it a background of a linear gradient. And this is going to be a gradient to the bottom. There's three, I'm going to use 3 arguments here. So I want to go to a very dark color, and I want to start, oh no, 2 bottoms, so it starts at the top. So I'm going to say, just to illustrate this, I'm going to start with white, and I'm going to go to black so that we can see what this looks like. And again, hopefully I didn't do anything dumb. And we'll see. There we go. So what I really want is to not actually even have this. I just turned off that style so I could hide it. I want to sample a color from here. So if I do just to give myself, oh, misspelled it. Background color red. So I'm just going to give, did it on the wrong element. That was dumb. What I want to do is just give myself anything here with a color. I just want to have an element appear here with a color so that I can then use the color picker to grab one of my darker shades down here and then get that hex code. So now I've just sampled a color from my image, and I'm going to say, okay, I want to fade to that color, and I want to start with that color, but at 0% opacity, which is just that color with 0, 0 at the end, if I'm using hex. So let's see how that worked. Cool. Okay, so I've faded down into this color. I think that looks kind of cool. And then I'm going to use this same color as my body, the background color for my body. And let's see how that looks. Okay, cool. So you see what I mean? It kind of fades seamlessly into the rest of the page, just like these guys did. So I did that with a gradient overlaying my background, and then just set my body to be the same color as my gradient. Okay, I like it so far. Now, what do I need to do? Now I need to make this thing tall enough. So I'm going to go back to, do I have a main element defined? No, I don't. I'm going to make my main, right? I'm going to make my main big. Okay, I'm going to give it 2,000 pixels in height, so that when I come back over here, I've got somewhere to scroll to. So now we can scroll, and we're going to apply our styles to make this thing grow and shrink, or we're going to write our JavaScript, is how this is going to work. So at the bottom of our page, I've got 2 mains. At the bottom of our page, I'm going to do script. And let me think about this for a second. So I want to do a version of DocumentReady, just as a good practice. I'm going to do window dot, I'm going to add an event listener for the DOM content to be loaded, because I don't want to use jQuery if I don't have to, and I generally don't like to. So I'm going to do the vanilla JavaScript version of document.ready. If you're familiar with jQuery, what is it? Document.ready. I mean, this is super, boilerplate. This is something that you do for at the beginning of everything in jQuery to make sure that you don't try to fire any functions or do anything before the DOM loads, but also so that you don't pollute the global namespace with any function or variable names And you can avoid that by putting everything within a function. So if you're writing vanilla JavaScript or something really basic like this, it's a good idea to put everything within a function. And that function should wait for the DOM to load. DOM content loaded is going to be my first argument, and then my second argument is going to be a function. And I'm going to use an arrow function. So this is just kind of a callback that when the DOM content has loaded, it's going to fire this function, and I'm going to capture that event just in case I need it. Just as a habit, I'm including that. So now, let's just do this. I know, just to see if this function fires. I know this is not the best way to debug, but I like to just do a sanity check and make sure that I haven't done anything crazy, because I do that all the time. So first, I'm going to grab my nav element, and I'm going to call it my nav element, and I'm going to do document.get element by ID, and I don't think I gave this thing an ID, but I need it to have one. ID equals, let's call it nav. Okay. So we're just going to call it nav. And now, okay, so we've got our element. Now what are we going to do? Now we want to wait for the user to scroll and then do something. So I'm going to add another event listener to the window. Add event listener. This time I'm going to listen for the scroll event. And I'm going to fire an anonymous function with no arguments after that because I don't really need any. So now, what do I want to do? Well, first, let's just say I'm going to log the scroll position every time we scroll. So what is that going to be? That's window dot scroll y, I think. Okay, so I'm going to log that every time I scroll. So whenever I scroll, I'm just going to fire a console log that's going to give me my scroll y position. So if I go to the console and reload and then scroll, cool. So I'm getting these values, which are my distance from the top of the page. So now we're going to hop back over, and I know that I'm able to get this. So what I want to say now is if the scroll position, if the scroll position is less than, oh no, hold on. If it's greater than a certain value, so let's start with like 20. If they've scrolled a little bit, basically. If it's greater than 20, and so what are we going to do? We kind of have two phases. It starts as the regular that we've already done, kind of the regular phase. Then it goes to white and shrunk, shrinks down, turns white, and then it goes away. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say if we've scrolled just a little bit, but we haven't scrolled too much, window.scroll y. If we haven't scrolled too much, so if it's greater than 20, but if it's less than, our height is 850, but I don't want it to be the whole, I don't want to wait until we've completely scrolled to the end of that gradient. So I'm going to take off about 100 pixels and say if it's less than 750, then we're going to add a class to our nav. So I'm going to say nav element, and you do this with class, which one? Class list. And then I've got to, I'm going to add to that class list. Cool. And so that means I've got to come up with a class to add to this. I'm going to call it, I don't know, Nav White, let's just say. Then I'm going to add to my class list, and let's go back up and put this with my rest of my nav styles. So Nav White is the first one as soon as you scroll down a little bit. And what is Nav White going to look like? Well, it's going to be white. It's going to be a little shorter than before. So we started with 75. Let's make it a height of 50 pixels. And then we're going to give it, if we turn the background white, then we won't be able to see this text. So we're going to have to change the color to black. Okay, so what this should do is when the scroll position is greater than 20 or less than 750, we're going to add this class to our nav. Let's see if that worked. Sure did, but they didn't have a transition, which I want to have. we're going to say transition 0.3. How about 0.5 seconds so that it doesn't just jump? There we go. Now it kind of transitioned. Oops. Transitioned into that. I like that a lot. Okay, so that's if the scroll position is greater than 20 but less than 750. And then I'm going to say another one if the scroll Y, once we get to 750, because this will fire up into so long as it's less than 750. So I'm going to say if it's greater than or equal to 750, then we've got to add another class that's going to override this one. And then it's going to be, I don't know, Nav Closed. And Nav Closed is going to make the nav disappear from the page. And what am I going to do here? This is already fixed position. So I'm going to position it to a top position that is negative 51 pixels to move this thing out of the viewport, because it currently has a height of 50 pixels as of the time that this will be applied. It's 50, but it's got a 1 pixel border at the bottom, so this should move it just out of the viewport. I think that's all I need. Let's see what happens. So I'll scroll down, I'll get the short one, and then there it goes. Cool. Well, you'll notice these don't undo themselves. So I can go down once and then it's done, and then I can never get my nav back, so I need to fix that. So what I want to do is, well, for starters, if I'm between this range, then I want to remove Nav Closed, right? Because I think that's just remove Nav Closed. Let's test that real quick. So when I'm within this range, I know that I'm going to want to remove Nav Closed, and it works. Cool. So when I go back up, so long as I'm within this range, I'll remove Nav Closed. But now I never remove my Nav White, even when I'm at the very top. So to me, logically, it makes sense to start with my lowest value and go to my highest value. So now I'm going to say, now if it's less than or equal to 20, well then I am going to certainly remove Nav White, but just in case someone flew to the top of the page. So for instance, here's what will happen. If I reload this, it's going to go, it's going to disappear, going to come back, and now it's going to come off. But what if, oops, let's try it again. Okay, it didn't break on me. My concern is if someone flies to the top and somehow these values between 750 and 20 don't ever register, then Nav Closed would never get removed. It's just messy. It would get messy to not also manually remove Nav Closed from our class list when we're less than 20, when we're at a scroll position of less than 20. I hope that makes sense, right? I just am going to make absolutely sure that there's no way that you could remove Nav White without also removing Nav Closed, just so that no one gets any weird behaviors here. Kind of covering my ass. Scroll down, goes away, scroll back up, comes back to the top. Here we go. Cool. So that's it. That's our nav, and I think it looks, very much like theirs. Maybe even a little better. Theirs is a little jumpier, or a little laggier. This one feels real snappy. Okay. If you have any questions, then let me know. Otherwise, I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.